All praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, and double honors to the elders of GMS. All praises to Yahweh Shai and Yahweh and all the other camps out there doing the work in the name of Yahweh, Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai. Now, today we're going to go through a little bit of history to do with the Israelites, the true Hebrew Israelites. We've been across these points many a times before, but today I just want to actually point out to all my brothers out there, for all those who don't know this truth, that the Israelites were taken into slavery via ships from where? From the west coast of Africa, yeah, which used to be called Negroland, yeah, from the west coast of Africa. That's where they were taken into captivity, yeah. So these maps that you're looking at are maps that were produced by a professional map engraver, or should I say, professional map engraver, and his name was Edward Bowen. Now, Edward Bowen was producing maps from 1694, 17th century, till 1767, to the 18th century, right? He was an English map engraver, and what should I say? He was born in 1694, should I say, basically, yeah, around that time. But he was producing maps from the 18th century going upwards, yeah. He was an English map engraver who worked for none other than King George II of England. He also did a lot of works and map engraving for Louis XV of France, yeah, as a geographer. He was an 18th century map and print seller, yeah. Edward Bowen, that's his name, Emanuelbowen, yeah, Edward Bowen. He was an 18th century map and print seller who worked in London from 1714, yeah, which is the early 18th century. He was producing some of the best and attractive maps of the century. That's why he was in high demand. So if you could imagine, top photographers and so, people that are in certain fields of business and specialists that are in high demand to produce particular things for corporations or individuals or, private investors. He was the same. He was in high demand, right? And he was a reoccurring feature of Bowen's work was evident even on the early road maps, was his habit of filling every corner and space of the maps with jottings and footnotes, both historical and topographical, yeah. One of the earliest engraved works Britannia depicted, published in 1720, contained over 200 road maps together with a miniature country map of each of the countries of England and Wales. It was an unusual feature on the atlas, and the maps were engraved on both sides of each page, and the result was in a handier book size. Okay, and he also issued with John Owen a book of road maps based as unusual time. So basically, what they're saying about this man here, Edward Bowen, who was a map engraver, that he was particular to detail. Yeah, everything he did had to be done in fine detail. And he even, like they said, put footnotes and explanations of historical and topographical information on the maps with footnotes, so that people could have the understanding of what this map represented and when he was producing it and why he went through all that trouble. So he was very particular in detailing every little bit of information that he came across when he was engraving these maps. So one thing we do know about this man is that when he produced this map here, white supremacy had not kicked in yet. Yeah, it might be discussed about in certain corners of society, but as a whole and as a thing that the white men use as an indoctrination for the whole world hadn't kicked in yet. Didn't probably start kicking in until the late 18th century. The full force of white supremacy, let me tell you this. So when this man, Edward Bowen, was defining this map here, yeah, he was showing you exactly what he came across on the west coast of Africa. Yeah? So let's just quickly go through that, yeah, before we talk about some scriptures. So, if you look at the map itself, it says Negroland. Yeah? As you can see, it is the west coast of Africa. So as we get closer to the map, as you can see, it says Negroland. Yeah? You can see it says Upper Proper Guinea, underneath Negroland. Yeah? So, if you look up there, you can see it showing you other parts of it. Yeah? So you've got parts of, what's it say? Parts of the Barbary. Yeah? And then you've got the desert, where it's showing you the Sahara. Can you see that? Sahara desert. Yeah? So, it's, you know, like I said, it's got all the different places. It's showing you the people, the different kingdoms on the maps. Kingdom of Sonda. Yeah? Country of Golden. Yeah? The Zwangziga. Yeah? 12th. Kingdom of Zanarara over there. You got the Kingdom of Agdes, yeah, Kingdom of Safara, Kingdom of Beto, Tamaya, Demina. And when you come down into the Negroland itself, the heart of Negroland, you've got the Kingdom of Timbut, which would be Tumbat, probably Timbuktu, Kingdom of Gargo underneath that. And when you come down further, you see where it says Slave Coast, Gold Coast, as we know those are modern day, what, Ghana, yeah, we know what they're facing up. That's what they would describe, because the Slave Coast and the Gold Coast is where all the slaves came from. That's why they call it the Slave Coast. And when we go over on the Slave Coast here, we see it says what? Let's take the camera back a bit. As I said, people of Guinea, yeah. We go further in. We've got the Kingdom of Benin. So these countries still exist today. Benin, Guinea, they are still there in West Africa today, yeah, which we know. So, if we look underneath, come across, as you look, you see where it says Slave Coast? We're going to get closer up for you so you can see that. You can see where it says Slave Coast, just above it. What does that say? Kingdom of Juda, Juda, or Whidah, yeah, which is another way of saying Juda, yeah, in a different language, right? Where it says Slave Coast and Gold Coast, right? So let's go to a map that's got a little bit of a close-up, because what I did, I redid that part of the map so you can see it in a much closer. So look at that. It says Kingdom of Juda. Yeah, Slave Coast. Yeah, and you see Jews in Africa. Whidah. Yeah, so it says there Juda. Yeah, so we know for a fact when we look at these maps that were drawn and engraved and designed by Edward Bowen, who went there under no false pretense, was doing work for the royal families, for the different royal families in Europe, creating these maps because, as you know, they just started to colonize Africa, yeah, at that time. When he came across these things, he wrote them down. He wasn't to know that in a probably another 50, 60 years, probably another 40 years after his death, he died in 1767, so around about the beginning of the 19th century, which would have been 1801, so we say that another 30 years after his death, that white supremacy kicked in. This white man's supremacy of controlling and ruling the world. And as you know, Europe was already going through its Renaissance period. So when you was going back to places like Spain and Portugal and Germany and anywhere sort of like throughout the West and the East, where the West and the East meets in Europe, they was already going through the Renaissance. Yeah, France was just beginning the parts of their Renaissance. They was all going through this, so they was changing everything that was representing the black kings of Europe. As we know, Europe was ruled by black kings right up until the 17th century. Yeah, the beginning of the 17th century was when the white man took total rule over Europe. Yeah, so that would have been 1601. That's when they took total control of Europe. Yeah, but prior to that, the last black royal king that was in Europe around that time would have been King James the Sixth and King James the First of England. King James the Sixth, King James the First of England would have been him and his children, because Charles, his son, Charles the First, would have been the last black king of England, and also probably the last black king of Europe at that time. So white supremacy had kicked in. The Renaissance had kicked in. Esau, the Edomites, had now taken control of Europe. So 40, 50 years after these maps were done, or about 50 years after these maps were done, this is when things changed. So if you was to look at a map representing that part of the west coast of Africa today, you wouldn't see none of this information. If you was to look at a map that was created, say, from the 19th century going up, so say from about 1801, from 1801 going up to today, all this has been removed, all this information. Why? Because the white man was on the beginning of his enslaving of the children of God the Most High. As you can see, it says the Kingdom of Juda. He was at the beginning of enslaving them, yeah? And also, what he was doing now, he was removing them from a temporary place where they had gone to. Because you've got to remember that we ended up in the west coast of Africa due to circumstances back in 70 AD, which we're going to go through in a very short while. So, just to let you know that this is where we came from before we arrived in the Americas. And before we arrived in the west coast of Africa, we came out of the land of Israel. And that was under the persecutions of the Romans, Vespasian. Yeah, he was the Roman emperor that basically took down Jerusalem. And over 1 million Jews fled Jerusalem and went into the west coast of Africa. Yeah? And then you had about another 100,000 Jews that went off into Europe. Yeah? Up into the west of Europe, going up, or should I say up into the north of Europe, because they went up into all the different countries that surrounded Israel at the time that we know as Europe today. Yeah? But over 1 million Jews. And remember, these are black people, people of colour. These ain't those white Caucasian Jews, so-called Jews that you see living in Israel today, walking around in England today with their little twiddlies down their sides and dressing up in black because they're trying to somehow fulfill the scriptures by dressing in full black. When they know the scriptures, when they're talking about black Jews, talking about their skin, not the long overcoats that they're wearing and the black hats that they're wearing, okay? Let's just get that straight, because that's the closest that these so-called Caucasian white Jews are going to get to be looking like black people, is by dressing up in these full black suits that they wear and their black hats to try to fulfill the prophecy that Jeremiah says that the Jews are blackened to the ground. Yeah, in Jeremiah chapter 14 verse 2. As we know that. So, like I said before, this map here was done by Edward Bowen, yeah, who was an engraver, an English map engraver, who lived from 1694 to 1767 and worked for King George of England and Louis XV of France. So his credentials were impeccable at that time. Because at that time when he went there, the Europeans were colonizing Africa. They knew about the West Coast, they knew about the gold, they knew about the stories of King Solomon's mines. These people are not stupid, they don't go into these places without doing their research. So they knew about these things, and they also knew that the black Jews, the real Jews, fled Israel to the west coast of Africa during the siege by Vespasian in 70 AD. They know they're not stupid, they know they're right about these things. They're the ones that helped print these books. But like I say, they did a lot of these things before they realised that they didn't want us to know these things, or at a particular point in time where they believed that we were never going to be able to read or write to even know about these things. So they openly wrote and kept documents about certain things for themselves. But as we say today, boy, the internet is what? It's a blessing from above. Because if it wasn't for the internet, a lot of this information would still be hidden in these bastards' cupboards, closets, Vaticans, Smithsonians, Louvre museums, so forth. But because the Most High gave the white man the intelligence to create the internet in the 1990s, because we're coming to the end. The whole world is going to be aware of what's going on. What you see going on in Israel today with those Palestinians, and you got the Palestinians stabbing these Israelis, they can kill each other all fucking day long. Because none of them should be in the land. They're not the real Jews, yeah? Those so-called Arabs that are stabbing them, those